Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Christ consciousness. Now, let's talk about radionics and symbolic rates or numbers. Now, in this world, as much as I kind of have a personal dislike for it, we have to quantify everything by making it a number. Now, there's always been a criticism of that, we're not numbers, we're not serial numbers. We really are in life, though. You have a ID card that has a number on it, and that's really what you are in this life to a large degree. You're your ID number, your social security number. This is what. So, when it comes to being a human being, well, we're not numbers, but why would that necessarily be negative? You're a 125072 biological entity. Sounds terrible because we've been told that that is bad. I'm not sure it is. We do have to quantify everything. And while people are not necessarily able to be pigeonholed, to a certain degree they are. I mean, you're an X type of person. You're a male, middle-aged, whatever it may be. You're a female, you're young, whatever. You may have a racial background. You're Asian. You're a male Asian who's young. So the whole idea is, that could be quantified in a number. I mean, that's how they break numbers down. I believe Social Security numbers they put your birth date in there and other things, etc. So they're coded to a degree. And so are most other numbers that are issued to you. There's codes in there. They're just not random numbers. They're numbers that mean something. So that's important to understand as well. And of course, when you get into radionics, which comes down, well, what are you going to use? Well, radionics, you're taking an informational energetic field, and how are you supposed to represent that? Now, you theoretically, I could guess, could use images. Now, I use both. Images are very important because your mind, no matter what it is, whether it's a number or anything else, converts it over into a physical-looking image. So you can call a car a 1576-3, and you understand in your mind, well, that's a Jaguar. And the minute your brain hears 5673, it flashes a Jaguar as the image. So everything ends up as an image. But we have to quantify certain things and understand what that is. How do you come up with an image for success? Love. So all of these things, well, there's a vibrational energy. So how do you, we have many of these alchemical oils, things that are, that have different factors. Love oils are a prime example of them, the alchemical. Some are very love-based, relationship, marriage-based. Other ones are dominating and sexual. And there's different types of success. What do you mean? Success energy is general, but also specific. There's success in what? Business, school, sports. Well, these are variants of success energies, although success in general, getting crown of success, generally you bring success energy into your life and it goes into what you are desiring. But if you wanted to quantify that better, well, you could obtain a radionic rate for success in sports. Okay? So, success in business. And there are business success alchemical oils as well. So they're variants because it's a different types of success. Now, crown of success is general and can be used for anything. Business success, you wouldn't want to use that for being successful in school or sports. But in general, how do you quantify something? Now, there has been particular sigils and glyphs, and generally these are images that mean something to you. A prime example of this, if you wanted to generate money success, well, what's an image of money? Well, there's obviously the most gross ones are an image of an actual currency. Dollar bill, $100 bill, $1,000 bill, a euro, a yen, whatever it may, a ruble. They call it ruble. It's not but many people use the dollar, but the dollar there's a Canadian dollar, there's an Australian dollar. So there are all these different things that are out there, and you could use the physical image of the currency, which vibrate money. There's also the physical image or symbol for a dollar bill, the dollar sign, the euro sign, the yen sign. Now, most currencies have a sign to them, an image representing that. Now, if you use the American dollar sign, I'm assuming everybody's familiar with that, or if we can use the European euro sign, well, this is a sign and it means money. But it's not very definitive. Is that a penny? Is it 50 cents? Is it 5 million? So the whole idea is when you're using that, you're using the general financial energies. Now, when you'd make a sigil, you would take all these currencies, the pictures of currencies. Usually the minimum you'd want to use is around 100. You don't want to use $1 or €1. You would use like $100 image. And then what would you do? Well, you would take these and you'd put them together kind of in a collage, the different types of money, because you want to draw energy from everywhere you can. Not even though you may be seeking dollars, all currencies have energy, and you want to bring that kind of energy around you to be a magnet. They also have their own sigil, the dollar sign, the yen, the euro sign. Now, these all have energy of money attached to them. So when you would make a type of a sigil, you would include these images together, stacked on each other. This is kind of a way to make a sigil. Kind of what I do with my sigils is you're compiling these together. And it's a complicated process, but you want to use that as one of your main areas. You have to use activator sigils and other things. It's a complicated process, and it's proprietary when it comes to this organization as well. So we don't, but this is how things are made in general. But we're trying to talk about what are we doing with a radionic instrument. Now, radionic instruments, to define everything, and you can get very definitive. Basically, you're assigning that. So if you're assigning financial money energies, and you've just produced this energy sigil, and now this is vibrating all that. Now you can include that vibration to be transferred over to you by placing a photo on top of it. And of course, this is a very low level of doing things. Everything has to be amplified. But what you really want to do is you need a number representation of this sigil energy. So this is where you dial into a machine to come up with, which is generally, and what I'm using now pretty much exclusively is a 9-dial rate. Anything less than 9 dials in terms of numbers are really not strong enough in terms of if you're dialing in a physical machine. Now, when you're using symbolic radionic machines or things that are just picking up energies or just using a rate, all you need is the amplifying plate, and whether it has 1 dial or 3 dials doesn't really matter when it's symbolic in nature, because the symbolic energy of that pattern will pick up whatever's put into it, no matter how many numbers it is. When you're trying to come up with a number, you need to have a 9-dial number to have enough psychoenergetic frequencies, these informational energetic fields, to tune them in well enough. And if you're a professional, you can go up from there. Some people use 12-dial machines. Some people have 24 dials, and there's extra dials and less dials. And it's, radionics is very complicated depending on the professionals who got into it. As a standard, which has been pretty much put together by Ruth Drown and Delaware and most of the people that came after Abrams in the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, when this got popular, particularly in England. Well, almost all of them exclusively used 9-dial machines. And of course, when we start getting into the 80s and 90s, people went crazy with the amount of dials they have. Particularly Kopin and many other manufacturers started making all these dials of machines. And you weren't really expected to dial these in. You were given rate books or numbers that represent a particular energy field, and you were supposed to take that book with the numbers in it and dial it into your machine. And basically that's how it was done in the past. Anyway, Ruth Drown did the same thing. You didn't pull your own numbers. They sold you a machine, and they would give you the rate that you needed, and you put it in your machine. So you were basically not being treated directly, but indirectly. So instead of going to the pharmacy and getting a prescription and taking pills, you were giving a number that you would dial into the machine that you purchased. And that's what Rooster and pretty much everybody else, Della, wore. Even Copen did this to a large degree. I mean, Copen had even a one-dial machine, which are basically worthless. He had those, and he has very beautiful machines, but there's really nothing in there in terms of the dialing. So the whole idea is that, and he has machines that, and there are many machines that were made, particularly by Della War, the famous person, that had many different dials. And they had, we have a machine here we're going to be selling soon, which is a base 44 machine, an old antique one, a classic one. And the dials went up to 44. Well, that's kind of interesting. Why not 100? Why only 44? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm assuming that's a tuning problem. One of the problems when you have to tune a dial that has 0 to 100 on it, and you have lots of these, is that you're going to spend your life doing it. I used to make machines with 0 to 100 dials, and there's secrets of how to find it quicker than going through 1, is this right, 2. And of course, you're generally using what's called the rubbing technique, which you're rubbing your fingers over a plate, and you're supposed to be feeling for a hesitance, or what's classified as a stick, and that means you're at the number. So what you do is you're turning that dial relatively quickly while moving your fingers, and this way you're not going one click at a time, you're going pretty quickly, and you're supposed to feel a particular stick. When you feel a little stick, then you kind of define it. That's how people were tuning these machines. Personally, I hate that. I don't think it's definitive enough. What's a stick? What's not a stick? It becomes very subjective, and while I am a person that believes that you are the entity to be subjective and figure out what's for you, it gets to be too subjective. I want to get there. And the way and I'll be showing people how to tune very soon here in a video with a machine. But you get close to the number, and then you define it by making sure that's 100% correct, because you got a strong reading there, using a pendulum, which is not really that time consuming. Instead of what's a stick, I just don't like the interpretation of that. Some people love it; they claim they can do it well. And people can be trained to do this, but you're going 100% into intuitiveness. You're really not getting a physical stick. What you're getting is your mind is saying, yeah, that kind of stuck there, and that's the number. Well, if you're going to do that, you can just concentrate on the dial. And there are many ways. I don't really have to dial a machine. I just have to put the information in a machine. And then I concentrate on each dial, and I say, well, what is the number for this particular thing? And it pops into my third eye. It's as simple as that. And, of course, that's somebody who's very, very advanced. It took years to get that. The proper way for non-advanced tuners is to use a pendulum by turning it to each number. And if it's 0 to 10, it's pretty easy to do, and generally you can move pretty fast, and I will demonstrate this in an actual video because I can't explain it in an audio here. But the whole idea is we're quantifying, we're getting an energy for what, and you can be very specific, and that's the beauty of using a radionic machine. You know, what is the success for me playing well in basketball? So when you learn how to do your own tuning, you can get that specific, and then you get the 9-dial number rate for that. Now, that number that you get now specifies that particular energy for you and only you. And that's the other good thing. Now, one of the problems with using general rates, where these rate books I just discussed, where they have rates for everything. Now, if it's a physical product, well, that makes sense. But you got to remember these are subatomic energy fields. And you don't get the same number all the time. Now, you can take the same energy product, and you're going to get different numbers every time you take the rate on that. And this is one of the enraging things with this technology. Now, a lot of times they're very similar numbers. So they're off by, some of the numbers are the same, other ones are off by a number or two. Now, the problem with subtle energy physics is that you are really picking up the essence of that item. So, and that item's essence is changing all the time. every phase of the moon, the vibration. Let's say you're tuning in for gold. The vibration for gold as a general energy is what you're looking for. It will vary throughout the day, the temperature, everything else. Gold will vary. Let's say you're searching for gold in Siberia. Well, you're going to have to get the rate for Siberian gold. If you're searching for gold in Arizona, you have to get the rate for gold in Arizona because the rates are going to be different. So you say, well, I want to pick a piece of gold up and get the rate for it. Well, you got to know where that gold came from because you're going to get the rate for that gold in that area. So if you're searching for it, that's important. These are the tricks of the trade. There is a general rate for gold. And if someone comes up with a rate for gold who is a professional, what you do is you're saying, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. I buy into his numbers. You take that into your consciousness, and now that becomes your rate for that type of gold. But it's still a general rate. So that's what people do with all rates they get from other people. Someone produces this, and you have to be very careful. You know, radionics is a very, very particular area of understanding. There's virtually nobody out there that knows anything about radionics from what I can see. There's a few practitioners, been around for a while. They have their own machines, and they're good with what they do for their machines and for their understanding. But they don't have a grasp of the entire area from what I can see. I don't know that many people. Radionic practitioners don't talk to each other. Nobody's friendly. Everybody considers the other person competition. And, of course, there is a major intelligence community harassment of radionic people because they don't want you to work together or produce advanced technologies. And they want to produce and give a lot of bad technology out, and they want certain selective, basically, unfortunately, satanic organizations who have taken over radionics. And they want to make sure that they are the ones that are empowered. So it's a complicated area, and that's just the political angle of it. But the bottom line is that this is a highly technical, very difficult field to do really well. You have to be highly trained. You have to know everything. I've studied it now for probably almost 40 years, maybe 35 or so. I'm trying to remember when I exactly got into this. I think it was the middle 80s or early 90s. It's hard to know. But this is when radionics started to become very big and metaphysically based. It was a lot of it metaphysically based was originally called psionics, which came from science fiction and was picked up by some authors, and there was even a couple of mass marketable books published by Llewellyn on psionics. But this was, which I like that term, this was basically a science fiction term, and there were books who talked about psionics, which was mind amplification through machines, which I think is a great term. Psi, making psychic, onyx, meaning electronics. So I think it's a great term. Radionics is kind of a misnomer. Now, the term radionics, of course, has been in use for many, many years, particularly when radios came into existence, and then everything was called radionic radio. So it's not really true. Radionics is a term that started to be used, it apparently seems to be coming from, and I'm trying to verify this, but apparently it was Ruth Drown, the famous chiropractor from Los Angeles who was persecuted, who coined that term because she thought it was radio type waves. But see, that's not necessarily wrong, what she was thinking. And she was involved in radios and built a lot of electronic stuff. Very interesting, particularly for a woman who was involved in all that. Quite interesting. So it's kind of a frequency. She saw radio frequencies and mind or psychic frequencies as similar. And you could say that to a kind of, if you put it in a giant box, you could say that's kind of true because your brain is putting off a certain amount of energy. It's very tiny, though. You are projecting in terms of the electromagnetic range. You're putting out a tiny amount of these energies. You could almost classify them as radio waves to a degree. But the psychic power is not electromagnetic in nature. This we've confirmed. It's really been confirmed for many years because people have been put in Faraday cages in places where there is no way of getting a electromagnetic signal there, yet they're able to pick up these psychic messages. This has been proven time and time again. So I won't get into that right now. I've talked about that already. But the numberization is the entire process that we do in radionics. Now, radionic people, I've been wrestling with the proper word there, and of course, we consider ourselves manifesting scientists. Subtle energy physicists really is a radionic practitioner. In a more metaphysical term, you could call yourself a techno-shaman, which is kind of a cool term, because you really are dealing in a shamanic way with technologies. There's also the techno-mage. Now, the techno-mage comes from a TV show. It was named Excalibur, a space show in particular. I forget the original series that came from, but there was a short series called Excalibur, an excellent one. And there was a techno-mage on there. And what he did through technology was to copy what magicians or occultists did, but using technology. So quite fascinating. That's a cool term, and I like the term mage, but techno-shaman is something that's been used for many years. But really what you are is a subtle energy physicist, and you need to understand the subtle energies, not in a mysterious or shamanic way. You need to understand it in kind of a plain scientific way, combined with very advanced understanding of the nature of the universe. When you start mystifying things and not naming them, well, this can become a problem. But you also have to be careful that you don't become arrogant like common schmientists do. They think they know everything. We got it all figured out. Well, you don't have it all figured out. You're really not achieving anything. You named a bunch of stuff that you can't do. It's like all the books on cancer and all diseases. Yeah, we know what cancer is. Well, if you knew what cancer was, you could really cure it. You don't really know what cancer is. You speculated through billions of pages of writing, but it really adds up to little or nothing. So you don't really understand it. You're trying to figure it out. That ain't good enough, especially when you're dying. So we want to quantify everything, and that's what radionics does. And you're able to quantify it through what? Well, I mean, we could make endless symbols up. So instead of having 1 to 10, each number could be a symbol, but numbers are symbols. When you get a 9-dial radionic rate, it's not about the number. Dial number 1 is 2. Dial number 3 is 8. Dial number 4 is 9. Well, it's not 9. So on that last dial, in terms of 9 of something. And this is when you get a number, that's the problem. Well, yeah, it's 9. It's 9 pieces of bubble gum. Well, no, that's not how we're using that number. We're not using it in a counting mode. So what we're doing is taking those 3 numbers, putting them together to create a symbol. That symbol then is what represents what you were trying to obtain. So if you're trying to get the rate for success again in basketball, let's say that, you would come up with a 9-dial rate for success in basketball, but it's not individually. So the first dial doesn't mean 1 of something. The second dial doesn't mean whatever that number is. And the third dial doesn't mean whatever that number is. And it goes on and on here. You're taking those individual energetic decodings or numbering of that particular informational energetic field, and you're numbering that information energetic field for success in basketball. So it's not the individual numbers, it's the numbers put together. And what is that? When you put a whole bunch of numbers together, what? Well, that's 864, 864,004, whatever. What? No. This is not a number. We're not counting. This is 8, 4, 6, 2, pushed together, and we're not coming up. We're not counting poker chips here. This isn't our bank account, unfortunately. This is a numerological representation of an informational energetic field. And how else are we supposed to represent it? And how are we supposed to decode it? Well, that's what dialing a radionic instrument does. You're getting that symbolic code, and that's a symbol. When you put a whole bunch of numbers together, as I said, it's not a money equation. You're not adding or subtraction. This is not some sort of calculus. You're forming a symbol of what that energetic field is, and the easiest way to do it is with numbers. Now, as I said, we could change the numbers on the dials to ducks and flies and cars and monkeys. And then you can come up, well, what's the rate for that? Well, 2 monkeys, a car, and a cup. Well, we could do that. Maybe that's even better to some degree. But generally what people do, and of course you want to have a universality of it, meaning you want to have dials that are normally numbered already. And this is how we start varying things to fit our society. Does that increase empowerment or decrease empowerment? Well, it may be better, and it just occurred to me that maybe there should be dials that have certain symbols on them. And you tune in a symbol instead of using a number, which is confused with counting. But let's not extrapolate into that area. The point is you get this number, and when it's multiple numbers put together without hyphens, or I should say without, what are those things in between it now? Not hyphens or whatever. Apostrophes. Is that what it is? So commas. So without putting commas between them to signify amounts of money for people to figure things out, you're using the number as if it was a pictograph. So you could say this is number hieroglyphics. This number means this informational energetic field, and that's what it is. Now, I further do, when I make up a particular informational energetic rate, is that I combine images that represent whatever that is. So, as I've mentioned before, if it's money, you put a bunch of money symbols there, and then you put the rate on top of it. This really doubles the power of the rate by including not only the number, the pictographic understanding of that informational, or defining of that informational energetic field, but you're putting energetic images behind it. And there are many. There are many codes from different civilizations. There's many images that mean different things and that have been used for thousands of years. So those carry energy. They're thought form information again. And that thought form has created this particular symbol, sigil, glyph, whatever it may be. This means that. And this is so typical of the English and the Chinese language, because what we have is not an explaining language, and this is something few people understand, and why English and Chinese are so superior to any other language. Now, other languages, or at least I believe most other languages, particularly European languages, are descriptive languages, and they're very badly descriptive. Since most European languages only have 3,000 to 5,000 words in it, they have to constantly combine these words together to get a meaning. Now, English has close to 1 million words. Why is that? Well, you're not combining 1 million words together. Each word is a definitive hieroglyphic or pictograph of what that means. That's why English is so superior and so descriptive. The other thing, it takes out the complete and silly nonsense that particularly European languages, but there's other languages as well, Sanskrit, and a lot of languages, I guess, in that area. I haven't studied that much, but I do know that Sanskrit has that same problem with masculine, feminine, and what they call neutral, or what I call in between. Whatever you want to call it, transsexual. Because we don't really, what is a neutral? If it's not masculine and feminine, then it has to be neutral. So what is that? So it looks like languages is following what culture has. But the bottom line is that most of these languages, including Sanskrit, where a lot of people think certain languages came from, and probably in that area. Sanskrit, which comes from India, has that kind of male, female, and neutral understanding to it. Well, that must have come from someone else, and it may be another language. Now, all European languages have this. in it. So you have a word, and that word is either masculine or feminine in most of them. Some languages have that third aspect. Sanskrit and, of course, German has 3. Most of them don't. Italian, Spanish, etc. don't. Now, English doesn't have that. Apparently, the English, or the Ingal tribe, decided to get away from naming everything based on its sex, which makes no sense at all. And there's no rhyme and reason to it. A table is masculine, a chair is feminine. All these things don't make any sense whatsoever. Why you'd even do that is kind of a mystery. It just kind of messes up a language, but it shows you the kind of psychotically, sexually based the human race is, and particularly, apparently, the Europeans that decided to do this. So the whole idea is you make something masculine, feminine. I like to say penis, vagina, or in between. And this is the kind of way they think. They also think backwards. So it's really a problem with European languages. And it's even more problem because they're very undefinitive. So you have to use descriptive words, and a lot of things in a descriptive word, you have to then figure out what it means in a sentence instead of what that word means. Now, in English, you have a particular word for a particular everything, just like in Chinese. So you'll have a word for fear. You'll have a word for I'm trying to think now, whatever it may be, you'll have a word for it. A particular one word, which is a symbolic representation of that energy. So other cultures don't have that. They are going to describe something, and you have to understand how that fits within the sentence. And it's very descriptive. So it's a real problem when you're trying to define things, and also a reason why that languages turn out to be so long description of things when it's really not needed. The other thing is why you have to, as I said, put sex into every word is just mind-boggling. And then you have to remember, because it makes no rhyme, and so there's no way to figure it out, you have to memorize whether something is male, female, or neutral. So, stupid. And, of course, all Europeans speak like Yoda. They say it backwards. Instead of saying, I'm going to the store I go to. This is how it is done, and so forth. Now, so they're thinking backwards. So, and this is a problem if you're trying to get something done internationally. This is why scientific languages, medical languages, the language of the air, the language of the sea is English. This is whatever, because it's an easy language to learn, pronunciate, etc. And they're generally, you get away from that multi-meaning. So the whole idea, if you say, if you bump into somebody and say, I'm sorry, in English, well, everybody understands that. In German, it's tut mir leid, I hurt for you. Well, that's ridiculous. But that's kind of an extrapolation of saying, I'm sorry. It's kind of an emotional thing to say in that particular situation. So this is how European languages are. And, of course, you throw in the male, female, the upside down, the left, the right, and you have a very silly language. So very undefined. Yet in English, as in Chinese, Chinese has a character. It's an actual symbol. We call them characters, is what they're named in English. It's a design, and you know exactly that design means that exact meaning. So, and the same thing with English. There's an exact word for most things. And, of course, English does get goofy in its own way. Why? The bear in the woods is the same as being bare, naked. This kind of thing should be cleaned up out of the English language once and for all. There should be one meaning for that. Bear should not mean bare naked. I'm not sure where that comes from, how that was interpreted. You're naked. You're not bare. He's bare naked. What does that mean? Is that even saying the same thing? So the whole idea is a lot of that should be cleaned up as well. I believe it was Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin wanted to put together a dictionary or whatever and wanted to clean up the English language. Of course, that never happened, but it's still the best descriptive language and easy to learn because the word is all you need to know, and then you can get your point across. While you're going to have to learn a sentence in another language, and you're going to have to use whether it's masculine or feminine, le in France. So all that kind of stuff that you happen, and Italian and Latin have similar. So these are all the things you run into. Spanish, I should say. So it's very important that we do. So we have to name something. So if we're going to define an energy, you need a highly trained professional to come up with a particular symbolic number that defines that particular energy. Now, the other thing is you can define an energy, and this is getting fairly advanced, and it's hard to say in a audio like this, but we will be getting into this as I show this directly. You can also get a number for a rate of something that you want to reverse. Now, you could get, let's say someone's, you could get the rate of someone who, let's say, has this blockages in life, which are called cross conditions. So you could get the rate for them being crossed. Now, this is the rate for them being crossed, meaning this is not something you want to send to them or you want to build upon, but you've got their negative bad energy rate. Well, what you do is then you take those numbers and you subtract them from 10. If you're using a 10-dial unit, if you're using a 100-dial unit, you would then subtract it from 100. So let's say that your first number on your first dial is 6, and this is the negative rate. Well, you subtract 6 from 10, getting 4, and you are sending the opposite energy to cancel out the sick energy. So this is a technique that's been used out there as well for a long time. And some people recommend this as a general rule out there of how to use machines. And there's nothing wrong with this, but you have to use both types of setting. You want to send the positive energy, but a lot of times if you send the canceled energy out there, you will cancel out that person's problem. So if they are having some sort of energetic health problems and you cancel out that energy that is affecting them by neutralizing it, well, their natural abilities kick in and they cure themselves. Or your luck will change, or whatever it is you're trying to change, because you have nullified that negative energy that is somehow emanating from you. That's another way to do it. That's the reverse dial technique. So, but you are still, no matter what you're doing, you're quantifying something because you have an actual number for it. But let's not get caught in the actual. We're not counting anything here. The number changes into what is an image. Because if you put a bunch of numbers together, what is it? Well, if you get away from the mathematical, this is a money number. It's just a representation through the using of these forms. These forms are what are called numbers, and which may or may not have any value to them in terms of their shape, but we have bought into the shape. But when you put all these shapes, and that's really all they are, together in you create a bigger shape, and that's where you're getting your actual quantified naming of an energetic field. So it's the easy way to do it. It's something we all understand. Math and the reality. Math, as a lot of scientists claim that math is a natural function of this universe, and we have discovered it, and that's just the way it is certainly something we all understand and buy into, and something that we really have to take note of. We have to quantify things. We have to be able to work with things. Now, how would we be able to get a reverse number if we didn't get the number to begin with? So if we use glyphs of some sort, let's say a triangle, 2 triangles and a square, well, how do you reverse that? So maybe if you wanted to reverse it by using glyphs, you could use an upside down triangle or pyramid shape, but what would you do with a square? So you'd have to avoid things that are the same whether they're reversed or not. You could technically reverse the symbol and send that to it in a more extrapolated view. But this becomes very confusing, and then people are going to not understand, well, what are these glyphs? What do they mean? So you could move into a glyph type system, but the numbers are what work well. People understand numbers. So if we were to use symbols, it would confuse people, and then you'd figure out, well, what's the reverse of that? When you use a number, since we use them in our day-to-day lives, we're able to translate those into any way we want to use them. All we have to do is get over some of the basic nonsense of what this number means, meaning We use numbers to count with. Numbers mean value of something. So you just have to get over that and see the number as a actual sigil. And this is very important when you're trying to take the energy in. And I will talk about this in another lecture. Hopefully, this has been clear to understand the numbers and radionics, or the rates that are produced through radionic technologies, otherwise known as subtle energy physics.